Please join me in welcoming Dr. Colyer to the podium.
Thank you for that. I wish my wife were here. She would laugh at it. The reason we're a little bit late, we were supposed to fly up, and as the plane was landing in Kansas City, they heard this loud thunk, and we blew a hydraulic line, and so at the very last minute, we are driving within the speed limit, I might add. But I also want to add, one of the first things Sam and I did was raise the speed limit to 75. But anyway, so my apologies. I was really hoping to be here early so I could visit. And it's August, and everybody's showing up today, and I appreciate that very much. What I thought we would do today is, I have a lot of friends here. But a lot of people don't know Jeff Colyer. And I thought maybe we'd give you a little bit of background and kind of some of the experiences. I've had a really wonderful set of experiences, but I wanted to give you some of my experiences and lessons that have changed my life and which we're going to use and have been really central to getting us here today. One of the things that we don't admit is that Kansas is the heart of America, and that is what I am passionate about. That my dream, my personal dream, is that our kids see this as where their future is. It's not in New York, it's not in California, it's here in Kansas. And that is what this is about. I hear somebody applauding back here. But that's what I'm passionate about. So I grew up in Hayes. I'm a fifth-generation Hayes kid. And so, growing up in Hayes, you learn some lessons like the wheat truck, when you're waiting in line, the radio never seems to work on it. But you also learn lessons that we came to Wichita, for when we wanted to go to the big city. But that we were all interconnected, that we are one Kansas, and that's just in your blood in 5 generations here. But I wanted to give you a couple of experiences and lessons I had. Growing up in Hayes, I started going to John F. Kennedy Middle School. And the notion there was idealism. That's what they talked about when you were in 5th grade. And they talked about America, and they talked about Kansas. And that we were here to make a difference. I ended up at a place called Thomas More Prep, and in high school, the captions, what they says, look, we're here to serve. We're here to make a difference in our lives. And at that point, I was very impressionable, and I was listening to them, and I said, well, if I wanted to serve, there's kind of 3 parts to this. There's a spiritual side to us, which colors everything, but I wouldn't make a very good priest. But that's one aspect. There's a physical side to us. Being a doctor would be a way of serving there, but there's also that bigger environment, and that I got very interested in public policy and how can we change the world, not just one-on-one, but bigger and together and working together. And so that was what my passion became, and I very deliberately chose doing 2 things at one time. So I was, at Georgetown, I was pre-med in economics, and in Cambridge and doing international relations, and we're doing medicine, and at KU for medical school, and while I'm in medical school, working for a think tank, and then started volunteering with IMC in Afghanistan. And so I've always been doing these 2 things. The lesson, though, for me is we're here to serve. We're here to make a difference in people's lives. Another lesson growing up in Hayes is my dad was a dentist, and we started out with a party line, Anybody remember having a party line? Yeah, and you could talk to all your neighbors. Well, you started with the party line, and then we got the phone, and it was in the kitchen. Younger folks, a party line is kind of like texting with all of your neighbors, only you just hear our voices, okay? Anyway, so we started with the telephone in the kitchen. Then you could get an extension in the room. And so my dad, who was a dentist, we also had a farm, but my dad was a dentist, so they got a telephone in his room. And so that way he could answer the calls late at night, there. And when I was a senior in high school, I went to my parents and said, could I get an extension too in my room? And they did. And so one night I'm out, we're at this party, I'm supposed to be home by midnight, and I really want to stay for a while. And so it's 5 minutes till midnight. I drive across town. I find a payphone. I put in 15 cents. We used to have payphones too. I put in 15 cents. I dial the number, and it's midnight. And phone rings once, phone rings twice, phone rings 3 times. Finally, my dad picks up and he goes, "Hello?" And I don't know what made me do this, but for some reason I just said, "It's okay, Dad, it's for me." And he hung up the phone. And so I go back to the party, and I last about 15 minutes, and that guilt comes in. I drive home, park in the house, crawl through the window, put the sheets over your head, and waited. And about 40 years later, I was telling that story, and my parents happened to be in the room. And that's when I got campused and put in timeout. But the lesson, though, was, Kansans, we do some interesting things. We're kind of clever when sometimes people least expect it, in us. Another lesson for me, though, was growing up in Hays. My dad was given up for adoption by his mom, and it happened to be 2 women married, 2 sisters married 2 brothers, and he ended up being cared for by his aunt, or his mother's sister. And Dad runs off, and Irene, this is the dirty 30s and the Dust Bowl, and what they did is they actually tried to open some restaurants in Blackwell, Oklahoma, and Wichita, and Hays, and Ohio, and other places across Kansas, and she made it to about 6th grade. But Irene was doing everything for my dad and his sister that she claimed that were not her own kids. And she only went to 6th grade, and she, everything that she got out of those restaurants, was trying to get those kids into high school, and my dad to actually go to college. And then, he had that grit too, and worked 3 jobs, with 3 kids, and went to dental school while he was doing it. And the thing I really learned was, we care. These families are what this is about, but usually the strongest person in the room is not the loudest person in the room. And that we've got to be so committed to people. Another piece of my life is my bride, Ruth. I met Ruth in church when I got to sit next to her. She was awfully cute. And that since I met her in church, I had to marry her. But Ruth and I dated for 7 years before we got married. I knew she was the one just a few weeks into it. But I was in medical school and a resident, and I was on every other night call as a resident. And, it wouldn't be fair and all of that. One Christmas we decided, we were going to get engaged. I was going to surprise her. She has this traditional Hispanic family. Her dad had been born in Chicago. Her mom were born in Chicago. It's a Mexican family, though, in the United States military for 25 years. And So when I go over to ask her mom's permission to ask for their daughter's hand, she made me wait 20 minutes before she said yes. That's how important family is. I mean, and they've treated me like a son there. But that lesson of family is so important, and that is what, Ruth and I, have had. We've got 3 daughters, and our 3 daughters this year are going to be going off to college. And of course, they scatter across the U.S., but their DNA, that 6th generation DNA, is here. But there are all sorts of temptations everywhere else. Now, boys are part of that temptation, but the girls usually win in bringing them back to where they are. But my goal is I want those girls to get the best education in the world, but I want them to see their future here, and they do. And we talk about it. And, having that lesson, is so important to me. I then ended up as an intern. I started out as an intern for Bob Dole. And it was when I was at Georgetown, I ended up as an intern for Bob Dole. And for some reason, they kind of liked me a little bit, and they talked to me. And one of the things that people don't know about Bob Dole is, we all know about his disability and his war heroism, and we also know what a humble guy he is. But one of the things that he had to do is he would insist on signing all of his letters every day. And what they would do is at the end of the day, they'd find, 15 minutes or so where he would just have to sign 200 letters. And when you have only one arm that works, that's a really difficult thing. And so what I would do is they said, Jeff, will you go in and just turn the pages for him and hold it so that he can sign that document. That is humility in that man. And that's something that's the core of Kansas and why we're so good. And, as a state, but that lesson in humility is something we probably need a little bit more of in this world now. I went from Bob Dole to working for Ronald Reagan. I was a White House fellow to President Reagan. It was a great honor for us. And you learn from him, that America, he said it. He believed it. It was in his DNA. America is the greatest country in the history of the world. And we responded to it. And everything didn't work perfectly. But he was committed, and he said, we're going to be low taxes, low regulation. We're going to work together. We're going to look in the long run. And learning that lesson, that it's about people and it's how we are together was something. But the other thing that I learned from him is we got to take my mom and dad there to meet him. And, he did this introduction and this presentation, and my parents are there, but he couldn't remember my name, but he knew he was Doc, and he knew that I was the guy who had spent 6 months in Afghanistan. And he when my mom and dad come up, and he says, "Oh, you're Doc's parents." Man, that made my mom proud. That he was so personal. What a lesson. For us that, the glass is not just half full or half empty. It's growing, and it's about people, and it's how we are together. That was a lesson there. So I'm a doctor. I started my own medical practice. I've had 25 employees. At one time, I've scaled back, and my practice has changed over the years. But I also, there were also times when you skip your paycheck, and you say, we're going to make sure our employees get first, and then you look at that team and how does the team reflect your values, and they have to talk to the patients, and really how do we become a family together in a business. And I learned the importance of that hard work and the commitments that people have. Also, as a doctor, another lesson, though, was meeting, when I would first meet a kid with a cleft lip or a cleft palate, and it would be on day one, and they're literally 3 years old, and mom and dad have now had this new child, but they have an unbelievable deformity that they see, and what are we going to do? And you have to go and you walk into that really difficult situation. You talk to the parents, and part of that conversation is, I hope you will invite me to your child's wedding or to their high school graduation. And I'm now kind of old enough that I'm starting to see some of those. But it's that long term, and we would have this conversation of, we're going to have some really big surgeries, but we're going to make big strides, but it's going to take time, and we're going to have zigs and zags, and we're going to have complications, and we're going to have issues, but we want to go to your daughter's wedding, someday. And looking at the long term was that lesson, that it was about people in that lesson that was there. I also volunteer with International Medical Corps, and I started out in Afghanistan. You saw this, literally, you saw the execution of a kid on television there. But what you have to do, though, is you got to think it's about lives, it's about people. And so in a place like South Sudan, I was there and filling in, and we had a little OB section, and I'm not an obstetrician, but I have delivered a bunch of babies, and we have this, there's active fighting going on, and all the hospitals are looted around, and this woman comes in, and we end up delivering a set of twins. And the twins are about 2 months premature. And believe me, we are 400 miles from the nearest paved road there. There's no oxygen because all the hospitals have been looted, and with all the fighting and all the warlords that are out there in the area, they looted all the hospitals, but we'd gone through this one, and MSF had it at one time, and in the corner was what was called an oxygen concentrator. It's a big box, but that's, when you get the nasal prongs, what you can breathe through, and I saw this there, and, this is completely occupied, by soldiers, and these are teenagers that they're high on cots. They've been whipped into a frenzy, and they have an AK-47, and sometimes they throw grenades at you, and sometimes they shoot at you, and they have, and sometimes they'll kind of look the other way, and you're walking through this situation, and you're listening and talking, and you're working with the local folks so that you can navigate through this thing. And we go and we find the warlord is there, and he wants a bribe, he wants something, and you've got to talk your way through it. And by the way, you've got to walk through that gauntlet of people with AK-47s around you, and you have to be firm, and you have to be non-threatening, and you have to make it meaningful for them that we have these twins that you can save them. And he agreed. And we got our little oxygen concentrator, but we have 2 babies. So we take the cord and the 2 prongs, and you cut it in half at the middle, and you put 1 prong to one kid, tape the other one to the other kid, and they're still alive. But the lesson the lesson on this, and for what we've been doing, is we are Kansans, and we believe in life. We believe in life. We believe in ourselves, and we will do things. We will do things to make sure they happen. And that's a lesson that has changed mine. A last lesson for you, I know I've kind of rambled on, but the last lesson for you was, in all of these war zones, you have to go into the war zone. And in a place like Iraq, during the invasion, I was the first American surgeon across the line. And we are unarmed. We're humanitarians. And there are IEDs that go off, and there's shelling, and there was looting, and oh my, hey, you got a nice car there, and they smash your windows and they try to get in, and they'll blow up an IED around the corner, what you're doing, you have to go through these checkpoints, but what you're doing is you're listening and working with the local folks, and you know where the war is going, and you're maneuvering through that. But what you're doing is you're listening and you're collaborating. You're working with them, and you get to that hospital, and this is an Iraqi hospital, and we've just bombed the living daylights out of them. It's not a really friendly place to show up, but it is. If you're genuine and you talk to them and you ask them, what are your needs, on that. But what the whole lesson of how you maneuver that is, you got to keep your head together. You got to be thinking. You got to deconflict when you do. If you have to escalate, you do. But you think. And you listen and you collaborate, but you think about and you keep your head together in a different way. It's one we've got to be thinking, and that's also I think a Kansas trait, that we can keep our head together, and rather these are situations where those soldiers, you saw them, those soldiers. They've been whipped into a frenzy. We're whipped into a frenzy, by ISIS. And, the American soldiers know that, they're very dangerous, and they become cannon fodder. Sometimes it becomes like a video game. But what they're doing, American soldiers are sitting there thinking about, okay, where are we going? How are we going to win? The guy who's directing them is the one that's hiding behind, and that's who you're going to. I think if we keep our head together, we can do things. And I know that. I've seen it day in and day out. So I know I've been pretty serious here, for you, but I wanted you to know a little bit about me. And I've just kind of decided, in all of this politics, this is a tremendous honor. And I just am so honored to be a part of all of your lives now. And so I've just said, just be yourself, Jeff. And I am just amazed at all the people that showed up today. But we're Kansans. We are the heart of America. We have challenges, and we meet them. And maybe we need to have a lot less talk come out of Topeka and a lot more listening. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to listen, and we're going to collaborate with our colleagues on all sides of the aisle. But like Ronald Reagan, I know I'm happy to take 70% glass full rather than an empty glass. And we're going to work together. And we have these wonderful building blocks today in Kansas, in Wichita and elsewhere. We have a top 10 school system. We have great education. We have good jobs. Our unemployment rate is 3.7, but no, it doesn't feel like it. And we got challenges, and we're going to work with this. And if we look in the long run together, Kansas will continue to be the heart and soul of America. Thank you very much. John, you have a couple of minutes for questions, is that right? And can I ask you one thing, though? Is I want to listen a little bit. And so I want you to tell me a little bit about what you're thinking as you're asking this.
Okay, well,
okay?
I'm the mic girl, so.
Yep, so that, I understand.
So I'll let everybody else know that there's a couple policies that the Pachyderm Club has. First of all is that members get priority for questions, and second of all, there's going to be a lot of questions, so if we can keep it down to questions and very minimal commentary, that would be great.
Actually, I would like a little bit of commentary. Okay. Seriously, I want to hear what you're thinking about. Okay, so I know that's kind of unusual for us to say, but yeah.
Well, first of all,
good seeing you.
Jeff, it's good to see you. Thank you for coming to Wichita.
Yeah.
And of course, we look forward to having you as our new governor.
Thank you.
And my first question is, will you be running again, or is it too early to ask that question? Because we're almost in that season already. We have some announced candidates already. So
Yeah.
I would really like to know what your feelings are there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is a great honor. I'll tell you what, my phone, I have had more text messages and more phone calls in the last 4 or 5 days than my teenagers in the last 4 months. Okay, thank you. And we'll be, what I'm really focusing on right now is how do we make this transition? We have to make this thing work. That's the best politics. We've got Kansas, though, that is my focus on getting that job done. I think I appreciate all of the interest in it. I don't have any announcements today, but you'll be hearing some soon. But I'm just committed to this state, and where are we going to be? In our future, how is our kids' future here? And that's what I'm about and listening to. So, thank you. I'm working very hard on doing my job, and I'm talking to people, and I know that sounds a little bit like a punt, but that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm doing. So, good. Yeah, another question.
Yes, Dr. Colyer, thank you for being here. My name is David Powell, and I'm from El Dorado, Kansas. You drove by us on the way down.
Yeah. My sister lived there for years. Her husband was a highway patrolman there for 15 years.
I want to state a few facts first and then ask my question. Congress recently failed to pass an Obamacare repeal and replacement, or even the straight, simple repeal of Obamacare. Tom Price, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, has said, since he was confirmed, that he would be happy to grant waivers from Obamacare to states that had a replacement plan. In 2013, Governor Brownback signed into law the mandate light legislation that I wrote that allows insurance companies to custom design both individual and group health plans in Kansas. Insurers may offer more than that plan design, but they may also then offer them mandate light plans. Ted Cruz used this law as the basis for the amendment he proposed in the U.S. Senate to be attached to one of the replacement plans, and I sent that to him. Last week, the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, stated that if passed, the Cruz Amendment would reduce the cost of both individual and group insurance by about 77% of today's current rates. So my question is to you, when you become governor, assuming the Brownback confirmation, what will you do to push forward the Kansas Obamacare waiver application, since we do have a replacement plan already on the statutes in our laws? And how soon can we expect you to help the citizens of our state out from under the failure of Obamacare?
Can I ask here, who's seen your rates go up double digits the last couple of years in the room? 2? Yeah, okay. And I can tell you the payment to doctors hasn't gone up double digits, nor to hospitals either. Obamacare has been devastating to Kansas, what it's done. It has sent everybody's rates through the roof. We had a system in Kansas where we had a Kansas Solutions that here's what Kansans thought would be the right package that they have. We were doing the regulation, the insurers, and all of that in Kansas, and we were, believe me, we were far less expensive than Massachusetts and a lot of other states then. And when Obamacare got passed, I spent much of the next year. I was in everywhere from Texas to Arkansas to Alaska talking about it, because what it was doing to my patients is it was making it unaffordable for them, but it was making bureaucracy and creating all sorts of bureaucracy. I mean, one of the other things about Obamacare is, the paperwork that we do right now. When you've been to the doctor, how often are they like this to you when they're on their computer, right? That's because that's part of Obamacare, and the challenges that we have under Obamacare of what it was doing to our costs, not just there, but also in other things, in Medicaid and elsewhere is huge. So the costs, it used to be that the federal government paid 60% and the state paid 40%. Well, if you move that number about 5 points, 5% or so, 5% on $3.5 billion is a lot of money. And that's happened under Obamacare. And that's money out of your pockets. And what Obamacare has done is create a lot of problems. So what we did, and I see as my job, is we're here to make solutions, even when bad things happen in D.C. And my job is to work with Kansans on Kansas solutions, so that when we have Kansas solutions, such as what you are suggesting, and is the right path of when you have Kansas solutions, okay, we can talk about affordability. We can talk about how do we make sure that we have enough insurers. We have some competition, for insurers, and we make sure that west of Wichita, you have insurers out there. The exchanges have been blowing apart. Blue Cross pulled out of the one out of Kansas City. One of the things we've done is we've actually found somebody else to step in at least, so people aren't left completely in the lurch. But the Obamacare, experiment has not worked for Kansas. And the big thing about Obamacare is there are programs called Medicaid, which most people understand is for poor people, but it also pays for disability service, and Medicare. Medicare is what you have when you're over 65. And what they did is they actually took money out of Medicare, and it gets redistributed to largely states outside of the Midwest. And so when the hospitals here in Kansas were losing money, it's Medicare now doesn't pay the cost of what it costs to serve somebody. And so we have these challenges. Now, what is really fantastic is that Tom Price, I go and see him, and I have. And I've been in the White House, and we have talked about this very issue here. And they're very open to us. So what we had to do under the old system is we actually did reform Medicaid there. And under old Medicaid, for example, to save money, a couple of things that they did, just so you know and compare. But under old Medicaid, if you were over the age of 18 years in the state of Kansas and you needed a heart transplant, they wouldn't pay for it to save money. That was the policy of the state of Kansas for a number of years. Or for people with disabilities who under Medicaid, if you're disabled, if you're 40 years old and you have Down syndrome, okay, this is a real, we have daycare, work, what do we do at night with them, making sure that they are safe. And the waiting list, we had 5 different waiting lists for people with various disabilities, and those waiting lists were 6, 7, 8 years in many instances. So what we did is we said, well, let's reform Medicaid. Let's do the Reagan thing. Let's compete. And so we competed it out. And for the first time, before we wouldn't have a whole lot of bidders, but we had several bidders and we bid it out. And we said, let's choose the top 3, and you give everybody a choice in that. And so they can move around, year in, year out. And But what we're going to do is we're going to hold back money from them, and they don't get it unless they have outcomes on this. And by the way, while I'm negotiating with you, I'm really serious about outcomes. So they're not going to pay for heart transplants. And there are dozens of Kansans that have had heart transplants because of this. We have lowered those waiting lists and eliminated some of them entirely now of what we inherited. Could we do more with a better Kansas-centric solution? Oh, yeah. We estimated we were going to save about $1 billion between 5 and 10 years. That wasn't me. That was the actuarial study that Billiman and all of these actuaries that go and they have to estimate that you're going to save money. And so we estimate the actuarial estimate was that we would save about $1 billion over 5 to 10 years. We hit the $1 billion mark around 36 months on that. And guess how we did it? The number of days, or the number of visits to primary care doctors are up double digits. The number of nights spent in the hospital are down double digits. The number of ER visits are down. And by the way, under Obamacare, we had to take another 120,000 people in since 2010 into our Medicaid system there. Is it perfect? Oh, no, there isn't a perfect one, but we've got one of the best ones. So we have some things here to build on. And so to your question there, I still have hope that Washington is going to come through, that after senators get back, and I'm hearing from them, and they are talking to lieutenant governors and governors across the state. We are talking to each other, and we all think that there's a path forward for us. So we're going to continue to work on that. I am very hopeful that we can have something. I would like to see some legislation that really allows Kansas to make its own decisions. But we're in that process, though, and it's not just going to be insurance stuff, but lots of other initiatives, like how do we make sure we have enough doctors in the state and enough nurses, and that our kids, we may even have a new medical school in the state in the next few years. Or, how do we make sure that they're staying in western Kansas, and they're the lifeblood, the economic lifeblood. So it's not just one little insurance thing. We gotta tackle these things, and I'm the same way on the economy. I know I'm long-winded on it, but I want you to kind of see where my head is at a little bit. And I think that's a good place, an opportunity for us. So, do I have time for one more question? Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to come to Wichita. I, as a Kansan, am incredibly concerned about this $1.2 billion bomb that was dropped on us from this Kansas legislature last year. It is certainly my belief that there were other approaches that could be taken, not putting people that make $60,000 or over in the highest tax bracket in the state, right? That's 2 teachers, a firefighter and a teacher. So my question to you is, first of all, where do you stand on that? Well, how would you have voted that? Would you have signed it? Would you not? And what would you have done differently if not? Okay.
So here's where we are today. Okay, all of this has transpired. Okay, everybody knows. I started for Bob Dole. I worked for Ronald Reagan. You all know I'm a low tax, low regulation, we're going to work together sort of guy. And we also, though, as a state, and legislators voted and voted in a veto-proof majority, voted to raise spending on K-12 education. What's happened has happened. Where are we going together? I'm listening more now. And I think what we do is we change the tone. That we change the tone. You're expecting us to change the tone. And you're expecting us, let's work on how we're going to grow our economy. And it does involve low regs and being very competitive in taxes, and it does involve having good schools. And how do we, now that we're putting more resources in it, how do we help our local school boards, let them have control? How do we empower them to put it lead on the target right there? And so for me, it is, where are we going? We have a new day, a new opportunity for us. We're going to work with all of you. We're working with everybody. Even if a couple of Democrats are willing to talk to us. But let's work together. But Kansas, we need to let Kansas be Kansas. Let's seize an opportunity. And I think, I hear it from legislators, too. And I know that fight intimately, but we are where we are. And when I walk into the operating room, or I meet a patient for the first time, and you have a gunshot wound, and it is devastating. And I know when I walk in the room that not only does your life change, but we're going to have multiple surgeries. We got to heal. We have to rehab. We have to do some more surgery. We need to work together. But we need to get you to your plan. And we know there are going to be complications in this, and there are going to be zigs and zags. I want people to know they're going to have somebody that has a steady head, that's going to listen to them, and that where those curves take us here, that our goal is Kansas is the vibrant economic heart of America, that we build on those things that we do have here, that we compete the daylights out of our neighbors, and that involves a whole lot of things, from technology to finances to having a world-class education in the state of Kansas, and that our futures are here. So I'm really optimistic about this, and I'm just telling you from my gut, where we are. Thank you very much. Cool. I like this.
Anybody else have a question?
Yep.
Dr. Carr, I'm Wes Guy, I represent the Builders Association here in this area. A little bit about what has happened to the building industry. In Kansas, in Wichita in particular, there's a lot of people think that the economy's back and housing's great. That isn't the case at all.
Doesn't feel like it.
No, it doesn't. We're only 55% of what we were today prior to 2007. We have not come back. And one of the biggest challenges I think our industry faces going forward is trying to maintain affordability through the lessening of regulations. The other thing that is critical is the development of a workforce with more emphasis put on workforce training through through technical schools and things of that nature. Even though we're only 55% back, we still have difficulty finding workers and hiring people that we can actually teach a craft to take up the slack for the future as the old guys kind of phase out. I would be interested, as you put this new face on Kansas, so to speak, pun intended, if you speak to us a little bit about what you think about vocational type training of all sorts and the funding of that.
For starters, we're going to be listening and working with everybody here. And what you're saying is what I hear all over the state. And I've been spending the last couple of years, a lot of people don't see it. I had a lot more freedom of movement as lieutenant governor. They recognized me in Freddie's the other night. But in talking to it was, when I talk to people, it's like, I need welders. I also need college graduates, too. And we have the community college system that we have is superb. And it can do better, and it wants to do better. One of the things that we've done is we've put more money into there, and so we're actually, if you're going to go earn a certificate when you're in high school, if you're going to earn a welder's or a CNA certificate, a certified nurse assistant certificate, we'll fund that. I think that as we're going forward, that as we're working together over this next year and a half of where are we going to be in a few years, that's front and center as part of that. And we're going to have to figure out how do we pay for this? How do we cajole Washington into a little bit of this? How do we participate? And I know builders and other folks, they're willing to step up too on this, and we haven't always listened. And so we want to do that. And that dignity of work is so important. One of the things that people don't know is, in the last few years, we've had 30,000 Kansans who were on welfare who are now working again. Wow. And you know what they're doing? They're actually earning more than the poverty line. And they have the dignity of work there. And how do we get that boat? So we're lifting on wages, and we're lifting on skill sets, and we're keeping taxes low, and we make it affordable. It's cutting regulation in there, and you be really firm and consistent about it. I think there's a great opportunity, but what it means for the single mom who gets her CNA certificate, and I have many friends who have done this, but they got their CNA certificate, certified nurse assistant, and they got a job, and their job is, cleaning the patient, bedpans, and all of that. And the hospitals need workers, just like you need workers. And what they end up doing is they pay for them to get their LPN, and then they come work as an LPN, as a license, and then they help them, work at night and during the day, and however they work their kids into it, and they work with them on, okay, now you can get an RN, and now we have somebody that is stable and in the middle class and lives the Kansas dream. And so let's look at it in these terms of how do we launch people to independence and how we're going. So, yeah.
Our next governor, Governor Jeff Colyer.